semplicemente di prendere posto per dare inizio alla sessione.
We are about to start, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seat. As you can see from the program, today we're going to speak about financial resources for a change in the economy of the future. And the subtitle is the topic that was requested to our speakers so that they can give us their evaluation or their reflections on it. The financial sector is undergoing rapid change because of new technologies and also because of the growing geopolitical instability at an international level. So the question that was asked to the members of the panel has been to give us their ideas on how they see the future developments of the sector from both points of view, from the technological and the point of view of the economic change in general. Each speaker will have about 10, 12, maximum of 15 minutes for their contributions. Then we shall have some short time for discussion. We have been requested to close our session at 10:45 and not at 11, because we have Ambassador Eurasian who will also take the floor. I give the floor directly to Vladimir Shubar, the president of Moscow Credit Bank.
Кто умеет? Окей, good. Доброе утро. По традиции по-русски. Я очень рад всех видеть сегодня в этом зале.
Good morning. I'm very glad to see you all here to participate in this morning's session. I'm convinced that it's going to be very interesting. I take the opportunity to thank the organizers for their invitation to take part in this forum. It is always important to participate in a debate on the topics that our chairman has recalled. So what about the world we are living in? It's not easy at all. The financial and credit policies of many countries is more and more rigid. There are growing pressures. There is a great volatility of debt, which is sold or sold out sometimes. You see the competition between different powers that are also exerting pressure on the general situation around the world. And on the whole, the geopolitical situation is also characterized by sanctions. We spoke so much about sanctions yesterday. There is quite a lot of fear, not of sanctions, but of the expectations around sanctions. So nobody knows what is going to happen in 1 month's time or so. We are always talking about fears, about danger, threats. This notwithstanding, the Russian situation is rather sustainable and stable. And this has been possible thanks to a series of factors. The oil prices, for example, which are higher than the prices on which the Russian budget was based a few years ago. The balance of payments depends on external funding in a very small degree. The authorities have very clear, transparent tools to be able to regulate the process. At the moment, we are also seeing growth in demand by consumers, which is supported by Russian banks. This process is also characterized by an increase of the average salary for Russian citizens, especially for skilled workers, thanks to the initiatives taken by Russian leaders and the measures adopted by the Central Russian Bank. The ruble is depending less and less from on the volatility of oil prices. But we've said that there are pressures from the geopolitical point of view. Next year, 2019, is going to give us more satisfaction in terms of economic growth. There's going to be an increase in taxes, we feel, more rigidity, more rigor on the part of our political leaders. But the growth should be around 1%. According to the same forecasts, in 1 year's time, 1 year later, 2020, growth could go up to 3% a year. Oil prices and wise policy implemented by the Russian bank will be able to compensate for uncertainties, the uncertainties caused by sanctions. Now, about the financial and banking system in Russia. In the past few years, the regulation of the sector, of the banking sector, has become stricter, like the representative of the Bank of Russia has explained. Most of this work has been carried out already. Regulators are convinced that the Russian financial market is rather sustainable. And I'm not just referring to banks, but also to other bodies, other subjects involved, other players. The dominant position has always been controlled by state banks, and the recovery of the banking system has given a larger share to state banks. They went up by 5%. In spite of this, there is a lot of competition, and this means that all banks, both state and private banks, have to improve their technologies. This is something favorable because this is an advantage for consumers at the end. At the moment, the banking system is going through a very favorable period. All Russian banks without difficulties have gone on to introduce the new rules, whereas in other countries there have been more difficulties in introducing change. There is good improvement in operational efficiency, and the relation between income and revenue is very good. The situation was very different a few years ago. Most banks had different exposure, which has improved a lot now. New technologies are enabling banks to be more efficient and to improve the indicator of their the indicators of their activity. Bank sustainability has been supported by the Bank of Russia, which has minimized the financial risks. We know that the Basel III rules have been introduced into Russia as well. Russia is one of the leaders of the financial market. The goal is to have access to long-term debt. This topic has been debated for a long time. Short-term credit is widely available in Russia, but long-term credit are a problem, and one of the sources of liquidity for Russian bank has come from the Western banks. But because of the sanctions, we have been cut out from this funding flow. In Russia, the banks are trying to create an independent market. This is an aspect we discussed yesterday too. There are initiatives by the Nichikonam Bank. I represent the Moscow Credit Bank here, and this comes second among private banks in Russia, and ranks in the seventh place among all banks in Russia. It is also important to stress that our bank is the largest private bank listed in the Moscow Stock Exchange. At the moment, 18% of our shares are traded. As I said, we are listed in the Moscow Stock Exchange. And another aspect to recall is that last year our bank was included in the systemic banks. There used to be 10 systemic banks, and now we've been added to that list. This is a very important fact to us, because it means that the central bank trusts us. The banking policy is focused on the Moscow region. This year, however, we decided to extend our horizon, and we are including the neighboring regions. Our bank is very active in credit to companies. About 50% of our portfolio includes credit to businesses. Our bank has been recognized as one of the best banks in Russia on several occasions, according to the indexes given by Euromoney and other banking networks. The three agencies, international rating agencies, have given credit to the stability and the reliability of our bank. If you need more information about our bank, you will find them easily. This last slide shows the activity of our bank in the international capital markets and the syndicate credit markets. We are very active in our area in terms of the issuing of bonds. We have attracted $1 billion in syndicate credits. We also work with the Italian banks which participate in our activity. Our mission also includes the need to be present in international markets, maybe without carrying out transactions, but just to inform our partners of the results achieved and about our initiatives. Not all Russian banks are following the same strategy. In just 1 year, we organized more than 300 events with the participation of 150 investors around the world. On the right-hand side of the slide, you can see the sanctions represented here. All investors have to make a decision. They have to decide whether there are risks or not. Even for hypothetical potential investors, the greater risk depends on sanctions. Up to now, problems, despite the problems, the existing problems, the banking system has survived. About 25% of investors have decided to leave the market. They sold Russian debt. Another share is not doing anything. They're just waiting and seeing. Another 25% have decided that this uncertain period is the right time to enter the market. We are convinced that at the end, the winners will be those who can have patience and wait, because surely the market is going to pick up again. And here I close. I thank you very much for your attention.
Allora, grazie a Vladimir Chubar per
Thank you very much, Mr. Chubar, for this overview on the Russian banking system. As you could appreciate, the Russian Federation has an asset, very positive one, which is the activities of the governor of the Russian Central Bank throughout the years, leading the economy and the Russian banking system towards the changes which have been pointed out by Vladimir. We will hear more about this from other speakers too. And now the floor to Alessandro Deccio. You can stay there if you like.
Grazie mille, buongiorno a tutti.
Thank you very much and good morning, everybody. The topic I will cover today is financial support to future investments. I see two basic elements we should focus on. First, as was mentioned by Mr. Chubar, the current level of geopolitical and also trade uncertainties creating a context where the risk is that investments come to a halt. Secondly, banking regulations and all the international trade uncertainties will end up slowing down the economy. I'm saying this as a representative of SACE and UNCA. We certainly have an important role to play in order to bridge this gap. If we want to support global growth, such as the one we've witnessed in the past 2 years, the positive investment flow has to continue, and all these tensions and international trade uncertainties should not translate into a standstill in investments and growth. We believe that what we do can make financial resources available to allow the banking system to fund medium to long-term investments, which are somehow fundamental and crucial for the economic development of the countries involved. This is particularly important for Italy because Italy has traditionally been an exporting country. And this is also very important in the context of the relations between Italy and Russia. And this is how we perceive our mission. As an export credit agency, we try and fill gaps, overcoming uncertainties and making people comfortable so that the industry and the banking system can guarantee consistency in the investment flows. This certainly translates into many operations. SACE has become the major European credit agency, and last year we handled amounts very close to 20 billion, and this year we intend to reach 30 billion transactions. We want to support medium to long-term investments, and this is very important to Italian stakeholders. It's very important also to allow Italian companies to be present in Russia and invest. What about our activities in Russia? As we know, the Russian market has always been one of the most important ones for Italian exports. And we also know that there has been an impact in the years from 2014 to 2016, when the sanctions started to be applied. We have been particularly appreciated for our work, and we've also appreciated how the Bank of Russia and the Russian government were able to handle a potentially critical period. In 2014, there were major expectations of a recession on the Russian market. Instead, they were able to control the situation, to keep everything under control for the benefit of the Russian economy, but also for the benefit of those that continued believing in investing in that country. A context of stability was ensured. In 2017, Italian exports grew significantly by approximately 20%, equaling 8 billion. Yet this is always less than a few years before. We still have great potentials to catch up and have new export opportunities. Export opportunities can be found in several sectors: industrial investments and technologies, as well as agricultural and food products, energy industry, consumer goods, and infrastructures. The Italian companies continue to be rather interested in the Russian market, and we try to support them in all these projects. Russia is the second most important market for SACE. We have a risk stock equaling 3.5 billion, and together with Turkey, Russia is the country where we have most transactions in place. And we have a pipeline of transactions equaling almost 3 billion. And this is a sign of our commitment, trying to continue being present there to support investments in infrastructures, not just in oil and gas, but also favoring the exports of Italian products. There are major projects, for example, the natural gas industry and the Yamal project. We were fortunate because we were among the first to believe in this project. It was highly successful. Now phase 2 is opening up with major investments, and we believe that the Italian technology will be very much needed there, as is the case in the chemistry and oil industries. I think that in this context, we need consistent dialogue, not just with the institutions, but also with the banking industry and the clients. It's very important to be able to establish a dialogue which allows the Export Credit Agency to use its flexibility to bridge and fill those gaps which make projects fundable. We are all aware of the fact that we need to develop additional skills and competencies in relation to international compliance. We're very proud because even in a context of sanctions, we were able to continue working and supporting projects in Russia. Of course, we intend to continue doing so in an even broader way. We need compliance with the rules, and at the same time, we need to avoid constraints to the availability of funds on the Russian market. So really, we are strongly committed to Russia. We are strongly committed to being flexible and creative so that projects are fundable. All these are major projects impacting on growth. I think we also pay great attention not just to Russia, but also neighboring markets, Turkmenistan, for example, the TAPI project, and also in some countries, Uzbekistan and Belarus. There are situations which are certainly going towards an improvement, and we do hope we can help Italian companies be present there. Thank you very much.
Grazie Alessandro anche per gli spunti che ha fatto.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the ideas you have mentioned, for the operational modes you are developing. SACE is operating in a situation complicated by international sanctions, and at least personally, I see that there is an extension of the activities to the other markets of Central Asia. Now, the floor to Mauro Micillo, Head of Corporate and Investment Banking of Intesa Sanpaolo. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to such an important audience, and I thank in particular Professor Fallico for the commitment he has shown to organize this event. Now, in line with today's topic, financial resources for a change in the economy of the future, I would like to say a few words about the digital challenges that can have an impact or will have an impact on the banking system and the international banking model. There are three main lines: the impact of technologies in terms of opportunities that will open up in the world of services to businesses, the opportunities in terms of savings management, and then the blockchain technology the technology used by cryptocurrencies, Bitcoins in particular. But I will tell you about the potential uses of the blockchain. The Intesa Sanpaolo Bank feels that the new technologies applied to the world of finance are indeed a great opportunity. For this reason, it is getting ready to develop a technological startup to accelerate the technology transfer to the whole of the group for our benefit and to the benefit of our clients. We have an innovation center in the group which is supporting all the group divisions horizontally in technology innovation. We also have a venture capital center, and we are the only Italian partners of a consortium called R3, which is working on important applications of the blockchain technology. We are mainly referring to new services, instantaneous payments, the use of new data sources, alternative credit scoring, alternative funding such as crowdfunding, peer-to-peer lending, and the automation of all the end-to-end processes leading to an increase in efficiency. Like I said, a tool to support growth is that of investing selectively, using part of the bank's capital to give an impulse by investing through venture capital funds in the initiatives that we feel more important. When we speak about challenges, these are posed by users that are used to real-time services, low-cost services offered by Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Alibaba. These providers are expanding their activity to products very similar to the banking products. In the case of Intesa Sanpaolo, we are not just observing the new situation. Mobile banking is already used by 2.4 million clients. The transactions are more and more dematerialized. 20 million transactions have been carried out according to this mode. Our services are multi-channel. 85% of the retail products is available through internet banking today. In corporate banking, in our business plan, we have allotted important amounts to help businesses by digitalizing the processes, and this is unprecedented. Intesa Sanpaolo wishes to take the opportunities of the technology revolution. This is clear. We have stated this in the business plan submitted last February. We are committed to the digitalization of processes, the use of big data and cybersecurity. We do this well aware of our role and the protection of our country, and also aware of the confidence that the corporate sector and the families have for our bank. At the same time, we pay a lot of attention to people. This is a fundamental aspect in our work. On the one hand, the processes are digitalized and more efficient. But on the other hand, we are investing in skills, the competence of people that are fundamental to increase efficiency. In the case of medium-sized enterprises, in full collaboration with the retail division, we have an advisory service, a highly specialized service to support medium-sized businesses that could not use the same support services as the larger businesses. In short, this is the impact concerning service to businesses. I also mentioned the management of savings. There are applications that are B2C, better known as robo-advisory. Thanks to artificial intelligence and the development of new technology, it is possible to supply dedicated and specialized services to the retail clients. We feel that technology can provide an important advantage. It is an important asset, but the human aspect, empathy, the possibility to work together with the client is also fundamental. We are using the Robo4Advisor. We are making available to our employees the technology that can help them to provide the best possible service to our clients. And this is not a banal change. There are some repercussions. The stakeholders will have to evaluate this and get used to working in this new context. Clients shall have to evaluate autonomously if our offer meets their risk appetite. Financial operators will find a complex setting. Automation can increase the volumes, of course, but it also risks to make the relations with the client weaker. Financial operators will have to compete with the newcomers. Often the newcomers are large providers, internet companies, or controlled by internet companies. We very much believe in the central role of our people, and we feel that the human factor will always play a major role, although in a digitalized way. As a third point, I'd like to say a few words about the blockchain, which is a technology at the basis of the creation of the most important cryptocurrencies, such as bitcoins. I will not speak about cryptocurrencies. We know about the risks that these new currencies pose. EBA, the European Banking Authority, and the Bank of Italy have already studied their use, lack of information, lack of surveillance, risks due to malfunctioning, cyber attacks, the high volatility, the risk of losses are all aspects that should be taken into consideration. But the technology at the basis of cryptocurrencies, distributed ledger technology, have very interesting potentials. We are seeing that in the context of trade finance. They can reduce charges of reconciliation processes. It is a chain, an actual chain of checks in a blocked and automated process, which can increase efficiency for greater efficiency for clients. This year, consortium R3, which we joined, has carried out a first trade finance transaction, which instead of the normal 10-15 days has had a duration of 24 hours without any risks in terms of security. Since I suppose my time is up, these are the main three aspects I wanted to tell you about. And to conclude, I can say that the challenge that the banking industry has is to turn a threat into an opportunity. Intesa Sanpaolo, thanks to the investments made and its people, is looking to the future with confidence. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mauro Micillo, for introducing the other dimension that has been submitted to the members of the panel. As I said, the operational implications deriving from the new technology. In a very short speech, we have already heard a lot about these new technologies. Later, we shall have a chance of discussing more. Garajin Tosunan is the president of the Association of Russian Banks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear moderator. If you allow me, I will sit. I'd like to start my talk by thanking Professor Fallico for this unique opportunity. The level of this meeting is very high. I'd like to thank Banca Intesa, which is a member of our banking association. They've been our partners for a long time. Thanks for supporting our association, and thanks for working with us for many years. I'd like to point out that the previous colleagues talked about trust in us. This is very important in a context of difficulties in the financial sector in all countries. We're all going through a difficult period of time. Talking about financial resources and considerable growth, and this is the topic of our session, we need to think of the pros and cons of this period. Apart from the difficulties, there are also many factors giving rise to optimism. When we talk about new technologies, we have to acknowledge that even if in many instances politics is trying to divide the countries and building a wall between financial markets, and I'm referring to sanctions also. Well, on the other hand, there are new technologies which act as a ram, taking down these barriers and walls. Previously, blockchain technologies were mentioned, and they somehow eliminate the borders between countries and markets. In the long run, this will have positive implications. In Russia, we feel that there are problems like limited resources. I don't want to give you figures because Mr. Chubar already mentioned some figures. Nevertheless, let me point out that the financial market and the market of Eurasian countries are trying to look for resources and funds. Within this, we have to start considering where these resources can come from. Well, I don't know if we can advance the slides, or we can do without the slides. Never mind. Thank you. Maybe some people may question the thesis that I'm going to suggest now. In the current conditions, a source of funding could be the central banks of Eurasian countries, because in certain historical conditions, I think it is absolutely logical to resort to these instruments in the form of investment credits by the central banks, where these credits are not a universal remedy, a sort of panacea. But I don't think we should deny this possibility and give up the possibility of using these credits. The banks of Eurasian countries have the possibility to use these resources, to make use of them. Of course, we also have to consider the sovereign funds of Eurasian countries. We have to think of China, Singapore, and their experiences. They're really trying to look for areas where to apply their available resources, and we are interested in such resources. Furthermore, we should not neglect private capital, which is present in some countries. Private investors, too, are looking for new sectors. I'm referring to Western countries, the Gulf countries. Lately, there's also Russian capital of those that are afraid of sanctions and want to put their money in a secure place, and they bring it to Russia. I think we have the resources of financing available, but it's important to specify the needs very well. Where will all these resources be concentrated? Resources, as is usually the case, will try and go to the most convenient jurisdiction among the Eurasian countries. This means that every one of our countries in Eurasia should think about this. Russia is already thinking about this. Russia is trying to create a comfortable environment for the investors so that they are ready to invest in our country. I think it is quite a realistic and feasible task. We need to consider digitalization of the market in this perspective. Digitalization means that investors are more comfortable, and if they are more comfortable, they also have more trust. We have to consolidate trust vis-à-vis the Russian financial market. As for our association, let me remind you of specific economic zones which might turn into an important tool. So I think this is the idea, and this is what we intend to further develop. Let me also add that today the Russian legislation, and by the way, I must open a parenthesis here. Incidentally, yesterday I was a bit surprised because we did not hear about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies. I'm very happy because this morning we started hearing about this topic. In the first 6 months of this year, there have been many conferences, and at least half of the presentations was about blockchain and cryptocurrencies. We should not overestimate these technologies, but at the same time, we should avoid underestimating them. In legislation terms, a lot is being done in Russia to develop technologies for remote distance client identification. These technologies would be unthinkable without a legislation basis. Our country is very active in this. If remote or distance identification is supported by adequate protection systems, then, if we want to talk about the trends taking us to digitalization, well, the new technologies that are very important for the market will certainly allow us to generate an adequate level of trust, ensuring new possibilities and new investments. Yesterday, we also talked about national currency payments. It may happen that in a few years' time, national or international currencies will turn into cryptocurrencies. So the scenario will be completely different. Well, this will not happen in the near future, but thinking of applying national currencies on a large scale or thinking of a single currency for the Eurasian space is a task we should all be thinking about. All these new technologies, if implemented, will help us attract long-term investments suitable for further developing our markets. The most important factor, though, is not technologies, but trust, confidence. This brings people together and the parties together. Yesterday, there was a metaphor mentioned here. Ships that can only be driven if you combine universal efforts. I do hope that this forum, and once again I'm thanking the organizers, I do hope that this forum may contribute to promoting trust also in the financial industry. We should all work together, and I'm strongly recommending this, in order to achieve major results for all of us.
Grazie a Tosunia anche perché
Thanks very much, Mr. Tosunian, for highlighting two important aspects. There's a sort of common thread to all presentations. Mr. Tosunian talked about the developments in technology together with the development in the means for trading at an international level. Now, the last two talks will be more of a financial nature. The floor to Mr. Won, who is the manager of the Chinese American fund, which is called Shanghai JZ Equity Investment Fund. Please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I was born in China, but now I live in New York, America. Every year I travel all over the world. When I came to Europe, I was shocked by here nature. The economic of the Europe is not very good now, you know. And China's economic development very fast. When I come to Europe, I see so amazing culture and history, just like China. So I think how we could let the Europe economic rise up and developing very fast. This time I came to Italy, Verona. I was shocked by this, the old story and Romeo and Julia, and just like a history. It's amazing. I was shocked. So I think I have the idea 3 years ago when blockchain and the Bitcoin comes up. I think so many museums in Europe and over every place. I think if we consider we could digital these the relics and museums and so many good things in Europe is very interesting. So I want to talk organization of the art reshaping the value of the European civilization. European civilization is the only place to name of the continent. So many relaxed history, just like the Mona Lisa, Da Vinci, and Last Supper, and just quite laying in the museum. They're just waiting for every visit to see and driving something like this, that like students see how beautiful they are. I think if we could use the blockchain and just like the Bitcoin, we could do something more. So I think we could digital those relax they have the huge treasure in this museum. They did not, those museums and Europe and the entire did not notice. I think it's time to wake them up. This is a huge examination and something like that. We could do more. Just we say, the emerging of the Bitcoin and other digital currencies suggests that we could, the digital currency are made of use of the technology of the blockchain to enable rapid development of the transaction and better economic growth. And Bitcoin and other digital currency is just the numeral just seen did not useless. I think they did not have nothing back up. But our culture, our European culture and long history, those history relax, has long valuable. I think it's time to let to be used. And how to make this structure here and see is the big system to set up. In China, America had the good technology and much money to set this system. But Europe, how to do this and is maybe should do some step back. First, we should do something, make this condition to be digital, those art of the relax of about the history and something like this, because I think those because the United States currency and the US dollar and something just like the golden did not have the creative had did not very bad good now. So if we have the backup of Europe, this the big value of this Europe civilization culture. We could be more better if we could do something digital currency, back up those history and valuable history. So I think we could do something like the Bitcoin could do more because they do not need to trust any special reference to the restriction of the creative laws. Bitcoin and something digital currency is easy to hire up and price flexible greatly. That's the nothing, no use in itself. So if you could digital relax, we could do more. If we have something to do about what's this, we could make a big system. First, we should digitize the art of the relax in Europe, or maybe something Mona Lisa and David Michelangelo, and something like this. And then we could pick up those art relax just like this. We could digital then and make some digital currency. And then we could use the art trading and the auction company. They could use it to make the art market very big and large. When they could use this digital currency, this art currency, we could do more. They could expand those art and trading very fast and big and huge, not only in Europe and all over the world. When those guys accept the digital art currency, I think it's time to like the United dollar to be used in all over the world in many payment standards. So I think so many good, huge treasure in Europe and could make Italia and Europe wealth. Why we could not do this? So I think it's time to make those relax in museum. It's time to digital Europe, the first step from those old history art. So I think this is the good thing to Europe and the world, because the gold, the United States dollar, the creative is the gold stone, did not deserve to use it by all of us, because the United States used the dollar to hang over the treasure from all over the world. If you could use this digital culture of the human beauty from the history, I think is a good thing to our common thinking, and something just like this, I think it's worthless to do this. So I think if you could set up this scheme of the art currency and digital relax, we could do more, just like the Bitcoin of the world, not only to let the money from here to there, and like the blockchain to do something, make it easy to be used in all over the world. So the world currency will appear in this time. For now, I think we could do very interesting. It will let the Europe digital time. In the future, the artist digital currency based on the blockchain technology will become the common value system of the world identity. Its foundation is accumulation of the thousands of years of human civilization development and common regulation of wealth of the all mankind. It will cross the national boundary, and it's the reason and ways were more than Bitcoin, valuable and advanced. and think is based on the international contract development, accounting management. Something have the sense of the bureaucratic change is maybe recognized as the kind of the legal currency in the world, representing the value of the human common regularization, the development and the juridization of the finance and the digital value of the civilization, offending the value of the human civilization, representing the hope of the reveal the value of the civilization and the hope of the human future happiness. It emerged will not only recognize the Europe economic and finance order, but also give the world a new hope and a reassessment of the world of the good new finance of the environment. I think it's time to Europe digital area will start from then on. Thank you for what you're speaking. Thank you.
Grazie al dottor Wong che ci ha aperto una prospettiva anche abbastanza.
Thank you very much. You've opened a new perspective based on the evolution of the digital currencies, digital technologies that can provide new ideas as a support to the artistic sector, to the art sector, which brings together different cultures and the diversities of humankind. One last contribution for this morning, Andrei Zhuikov, partner and director of the Region Investment Company, JSC. They are institutional investors.
Спасибо. Добрый день.
Good morning. Let me thank the organizers of this conference and especially Professor Fallico for giving me the opportunity to talk here today. Let me start by talking about sanctions, a word which is used by all. In 2016, we had a new wave of US sanctions to Russia and Iran at the beginning of the trade war. And all this can lead to recession, to economic recession. Of course, this also has an impact on the Far East partners, both logistically and in tourism. Russia's trade with the Far East, well, it's a long-standing history. With strengthening of the relations in the early decades of last century, when the Soviet Union took part in the industrialization of many countries like India or the Japanese pipelines. Recently, we've seen an increase in the exchange and also trade with India, China, and Japan. Now this trade has reached a top level. At the same time, an agreement was signed on payments in the national currency between Russia and China. And with India too, the payments are made in national currencies. In 2015, there have been transactions on the stock exchange, on the Moscow Stock Exchange, in rubles. Let me now mention our role in this process. The Danivostochny Bank in the Far East is present in our association, and what they do is deal with payments in the different currencies. In 2005, or since 2005, the market for IFO bonds on the Moscow Stock Exchange has grown significantly thanks to International Financial Corporation, the Eurasian Development Bank, and the International Investment Bank. Now, following the sanctions, all these associations and corporations are leaving the Russian market. Last year, we became the first issuer of ruble bonds. This was for the Russian railway. We also had an issuer in Kazakhstan. The Russian Central Bank and the Kazakhstan National Bank have cooperated for this. 15 billion rubles is the value of these bonds, and they are available on both stock exchanges. Also, other players are interested in these bonds. The bonds issued abroad, the so-called Euro bonds, are also interesting. In 2014, their share has gone from 32 to approximately 50%, and somehow we've had a replacement in the foreign bonds. I need to talk about the tourist flows between Russia, China, and India. 5 million people a year travel between these countries. 5 million came to Russia from these countries using all the main transport modes. This flow of tourists has been continuously increasing in the past 3 years. This means improvement in infrastructures. We use the idea or the image of building bridges. We've implemented a connection between the border near Blagovianchensk and China, and there's a ropeway there which serves up to 2.5 million passengers. This is somehow a physical implementation of the One Belt, One Road concept. Our company is also active in the pension fund business. Pension funds are among the most important investments in Russia. 60 billion euros is their capital. And also private-public partnership is important and interesting for the purpose of investing money in the long term with a view to establishing pension funds. In Russia, Union Pay and JSB are becoming increasingly important. We issue payment cards. Back to investments. I must say that a large proportion of investments are made by companies investing in the Far East. More than 70 projects worth $100+ billion in total. They're being evaluated at the moment. An agreement was reached between Alibaba, Megaphone, and Mail.ru, as well as Russian Direct, with a basis or with a base of 100 million users having access to Mail.ru, creating a big platform. Mitsui from Japan bought shares of the pharmaceutical company R-Pharm with 3 plants. Another important operation in line with foreign participation is the acquisition of the 4th producer of tobacco in Russia by the Japanese. And then Fosun, which is a Chinese equity fund that bought a conference center with shopping mall not far from the Kremlin. Well, we already heard about this, but let me reiterate this. A major effect is expected also from the Northern Sea route. This is a very interesting project. The Japanese are interested in this project, and also Saudi Arabia. Let me take this opportunity to invite you to assess some projects. We have taken pictures. We've taken 30 photographs here to Verona, aerial photographs. They are displayed nearby here. I'll invite you to know Russia from Kamchatka to Kaliningrad through all these pictures. You can take a look at them. In the Soviet Union, there used to be a movie called Gaze Towards the Future. In that movie, there was a girl, or a young lady coming from the future. In the Soviet Union, when this young lady would say goodbye to her peers in the Soviet Union to go back to the future, the children would ask her, "How can we possibly come and see you in the future?" She answered, "Step by step, little by little." When will this digitalization come about? Slowly, little by little, step by step, we will also be able to achieve digitalization. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thanks to all panel members. Well, there have been a lot of insights and also a lot of points raised in relation to the question that was asked. Limited to the time we had available. We still have some time, I think, for some Q&A. I will start with a series of questions, but please, if you have any questions, join in and ask. If you need any clarifications or if you have comments or questions, we have received a lot of input for discussion. Let's see if we can make some additional comments.
Vladimir Chubar.
My first question is to Vladimir Chubar. it's about 2 points that you didn't touch upon, because you gave us an overview of the Russian banking system, and there was no time to go deep into the details. So, a comment on the implementation of new technologies. What's your point of view? And the other is a question in relation to sanctions. So we spoke of sanctions and new currencies. Everything revolves around a stone guessed. The role of the dollar and in the international financial system. And the fact that the sanctions that the US has imposed generously all over the world, well, these sanctions lead some countries taking part in international trade to defend themselves, identifying alternative currencies which, however, are not affected by control, are not controlled by the American authorities. There was a last slide that Andrei showed us. It was titled "The Dollarization is on the Way." The chairman said Andrei, but probably it's Vladimir. So, Vladimir, the floor to you.
Спасибо большое за вопрос. Слышно меня, да?
Thank you very much for your question. I'd like to start with question number 2. In the past 18 months, we have witnessed how the attention of the clients of our bank is attracted to the possibility of using alternative currencies. We have thought about the euro. Now, the tendency is that of considering making payments in local currencies. Or the alternative is either rubles or the Chinese yuan. We are just at the beginning of our process, but the decision is up to us. In July, our bank has adopted the strategy for Eastern countries, China mainly. And within this strategy, the banking business is a very special one. We depend on the clients, of course, and one of the strategies has to be that of long-term credit and loans. We are considering the Eastern line, the issuing of bonds in yuan or other currencies. We've had meetings in Hong Kong and Singapore. During the meetings, we have realized that there is a lot of interest on the part of the investors who have not yet taken a concrete action. So this is why we have to support them and have them understand that this could be really interesting to them. At least they have thanked us for going to Singapore and Hong Kong to explain our vision of the Russian economy and the problem of sanctions. Because sanctions are drawing us towards the Asian region. To reply to the first questions, I can say yes, technologies are important, but we should not overestimate them. A few years ago, a lot of debate was going on about technologies, about everything we could do with our mobiles. They said that bank would close down because of the mobiles. But it's the people that are at the center of the banking system. Clients needed to communicate with the bank, and many of our clients, like other speakers have said, very much appreciate the possibility not to use online channels, but they appreciate the alternative to be able to go to a physical bank and be able to speak to a person. No technology can totally replace people. The scoring technologies are just a support for our work, because it's people that can define programs, etc. We feel that in the immediate future this is not going to happen.
So, ha ricordato.
So, with regard to the digital aspect, the remark has been similar to that made by Mauro Micillo. He said that investments are fundamental, but you have to invest in the human capital. It is the people that are important for organizations. About the dollar and this shift towards Asia, are there any questions on the part of the members of the panel or from the audience? Or any remarks that you would like to make? Because Mr. Tosunian has also mentioned this, the weight that Asia has. Questions should be put into the microphone, otherwise it is impossible to hear.
Problema. Technology.
Pronto? Sì, ok. Alessandro Lantieri, Centro Studi Europa-Cina.
From the Europe-China Study Center, I very much appreciated the Chinese approach to our cultural assets. This is really important in Italy. The President Xi Jinping has really done something similar, in the sense that he has come to visit the art sites here. And China is getting organized to enhance the importance of artistic the art heritage. I would like to know what the other speakers think about this.
Niente di particolare, credo che l'osservazione che sia stata.
Well, the remarks that have been made about sanctions, which are rather rigorous and invasive, together with the international trade policies, are shifting attention to Asia on the part of Russia. This is something evident. It is not in the European interest, in the respect of international rules, etc. European businesses have to find a way to react or to do something for this shift towards the East to be more balanced. It is something fundamental for Italy. I don't think there is much can be added on this topic. The role of the dollar as a reserve currency is still prevalent. And the growth of China and its trends can outline different scenarios, but I think more time is needed to be able to have a clear view. I will not make reference to our great culture, but I will just say that today's mobile banking has an impact on culture in our everyday life. And I'm worried about it. Still, it is interesting. I see that my children are communicating with me by using text. And when they text to me, they ask me to put some more money on their account because they will have to buy lunch, they have to, they want to go to the cinema, etc. So we've been talking about the relationship between banks and clients. Personal relations are fundamental, but it is even more important to be able to see one's children and be able to talk to them and not just give them money through mobile banking. In one text, I told my daughter, "My dear, what do you think your father is? Is it an ATM or something?" And she said, she replied, "No, not at all, Dad, but you know, there are problems to be solved." So in some way, I will manage to educate my children, but you have to be careful and ensure that your children spend money for good things. So it's something philosophical, and this is the main problem. I don't know whether through digitalization and the new technologies, which of course are very convenient and easy to use, and when the financial borders will disappear in the world and we shall be able to make payments by using currencies, probably this is our immediate future. But at the same time, we should avoid to end up in an abstract space. Too much abstraction is not good at all. There is this danger, I feel. And again, about technology and financial investments, I'd like to ask Andrei Zuikov two things. Whether he can say something about the strategy of the investments that Russian financial institutions are making. And secondly, taking up a point mentioned by Mr. Micillo, in the brokerage activity or asset management of institution, what is the role that technology can play?
Ну, наверное, прежде всего, что дает нам финтех финансовых технологий?
First of all, I'd like to say that financial technologies are giving us three main things: rapidity, convenience, and quality. In Russia, we already have the possibility for clients to have access to brokerage systems remotely. And it is possible to communicate with the client by using a mobile phone. In 3 minutes, an account can be opened, a deposit can be made, or some advice can be given, assets can be bought. The level of penetration of these new services in Russia is still rather limited, because the subjects registered with the Russian stock exchange are just over 1 million of physical and legal persons. I hope that this process can receive an impulse. So we as professionals have to use certain strategies, but we should never forget quality. We have to focus on our clients. And then the question about investments, investment strategies. Some of our clients carry out a fundamental role for the sustainability of the financial market. Market volatility is not due to our Russian professionals, but rather to the foreign funds, which tended to buy and sell Russian bonds, treasury bonds. This category of investors should concentrate on long-term investments for a better financial sustainability. Again, I ask the floor, the audience, whether they would like to ask questions. Of course, they can, if they wish to. Good morning. I would like to ask a question. When I used to go to school, we were told a tale. An old man inviting the 3 children to distribute some branches, and he told his children, you can try and break these twigs, and then he put all the branches, all the twigs together, and his children could not break it. We are sort of hanging from the branch of a tree in our Eurasian region. Do you think we have already reached a point of no return? Can we go back to the principles of the past, or is it too late?
Очень хорошая притча. Я тоже своим детям недавно ее рассказывал как-то.
Well, your parable is very interesting. I told something similar to my children. They were fighting one day. I wanted them to find a compromise, and I told them something similar. But about your question on the point of no return, I will use your allegory in my work. I have received this question several times at an international level from the Americans. Often, it wasn't a question in their case, it was a statement. They would say that for Russia, sanctions have a favorable impact and not an unfavorable one. I have no idea about the point of no return. I think that there are several aspects that can help us to find common solutions. Sanctions have brought us together in a way. Any more remarks on the same topic? Well, I could give a short answer. Yes, the sanctions can bring the Eurasian region together. But this is not the only problem. We should not overestimate the importance of these factors. This common approach is also due to the wish to find common solutions to problems. Yesterday we heard a lot of examples that showed that development is possible only through common solutions. Otherwise we will lose our battle. So we should not overestimate sanctions and their impact. Mr. Decio, in your activity, the activity of SACE, have you seen any changes in the international trade flows, or do you think that the signs are not significant yet from this point of view. No, I wouldn't say that there are significant signs yet. What we see is the level of uncertainty that is increasing, and this tends to slow down the decision-making processes leading to investments. There is no slowing down of the international trade, but there is some concern about the slowing down of the decision-making processes. As I said, decisions on investments. I'm convinced that of the commercial practices, the customs duties, etc., will not reduce international trade flows. We can see that the velocity of transport and the global chains are so complex, so sophisticated that sometimes they can overcome the problem of customs duties. I mean, soon we shall find out, even in the case of sanctions, we shall find out that they are not going to produce the expected results. We have been talking about this this morning too. From some points of view, the American sanctions have brought together the Eurasian countries. They are more bonded now than before. This is a very important effect that had not been forecasted earlier on, before the sanctions. And similarly, the fact that we are saying that the dollar is should not be the only currency used for international trade is also something new. I think that now transport is so fast that it is much quicker than the policies that are implemented. In some cases, they are rather erratic and even more emotional than rational. As I said, we are worried of a slowing down of the investment flows from the point of view of Europe and Italy. Growth needs a large amount of investments to increase productivity. Europe badly needs investments. Not only the richest areas of the consumers, but Europe is also one of the main exporters in the world. But in the past 3 years, we've seen a decrease of 10%, whereas of our exports, just 3% in the case of the United States. So if we wanted to protect the European and Italian exports, if there is a reduction of investments, this is a greater disadvantage for our region, much more than the customs duties. Thank you, Alessandro. Would you like to add something, Mr. Micillo? I think that Alessandro has depicted a very clear image. He has explained that SACE is the main European player in his sector. So it is an important vantage point. What we are seeing today is a partial slowing down of the credit demand domestically. This doesn't mean that we are going backwards. There is just a slowing down because of the general uncertainty. At an international level, the corporate investment banking I'm leading is present in 26 countries. It accounts for 50% of 50% of its revenues comes from foreign clients. So we don't see a lot of fluctuations, but it is interesting to listen to Alessandro because from his position he is already seeing some change at an international level. Any more questions or remarks? Yes, there is a person here in front.
Simple consideration. There are 4 foreign currency: dollars, sterling pounds, euro, and now the Chinese yuan as the reserves. Why is the dollar? They are already there, the alternative of the dollars. But until we do not have trust, because the trust is under the value of the dollars. So we can try to do anything to find solution and alternative. But until we build up trust in other currency, all this exercise, which is extremely good, and I compliment all of you, will always be limited. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, all the financial activities based on reciprocal trust, confidence. It is the same for currencies, which are the symbol of our countries. They are the symbol of confidence in trade. These processes involving currencies are not going to be fast. It is something gradual, something slow. We can accelerate the process if the use of a currency that still benefits from this confidence, if this confidence is questioned, if the currency becomes difficult to use, for example, this condition would accelerate the use of alternative currencies that over time will acquire confidence. It takes a long time. If there are no further questions, I thank the speakers for their contributions. I thank all of you for your attention, and we are closing the session on time. Thank you.
Si avvisano i gentili ospiti che la pausa caffè avrà la durata di 15 minuti.
Dear guests, the coffee break will last for 15 minutes.
Уважаемые гости, кофе-пауза продлится 15 минут.